Seongah is a struggling student by day and a powerful shaman by night who dreams of escaping her life and getting into college. However, everything changes when she meets her first love, a guy cursed with terrible luck and destined to die young. Now determined to save him, she gets closer than she ever should, and the two slowly fall in love with each other. The story begins when Seongah, a powerful shaman, is in the middle of exorcising a stubborn evil spirit. Suddenly, Seongah's alarm goes off, and realizing she's late for her midterm exams, she abruptly removes her robe, revealing she's just a regular high school student. Seongah immediately abandons the exorcism and rushes to school, but arrives late and climbs over the wall, nearly falling until her best friend, Jiho, catches her. At school, Seongah is ignored like roadside trash, but hides her pain behind a forced smile. She dreams of living normally and going to college, but her poor grades make that impossible. After flopping another exam, she stays back to study, only to fall asleep within minutes. That night, her classmate Byom encounters a terrifying water ghost in the restroom, but no one believes him. Later, Seongah returns home, where her adoptive mother, Dongchan, scolds her for abandoning an exorcism earlier. Seongah then spends hours performing exhausting divination sessions, and during her final reading, she advises a client to prioritize appearances over love, making it clear she's never been in a relationship. The next day, Seongah shares this with Jiho and reveals that her ideal type is someone who would comfort a crying stranger. That night, Seongah's life takes an unexpected turn when Gyeonu arrives at the shrine with his grandmother, Oksun. She is instantly drawn to him, but quickly notices that he appears upside down. Oksun explains that Gyeonu has been plagued by constant misfortune and begs Seongah to save him. However, Seongah realizes that he only has 21 days left to live. Still, she decides to test if Gyeonu is worth saving by asking what he would do if he saw a stranger crying. His answer matches her ideal type perfectly, so she impulsively promises to protect him. After they leave, Dongchan scolds her for making such a dangerous commitment, explaining that those who appear upside down are fated to die from misfortune. She also reminds Seongah how she tried so hard to save a man in the past, but almost lost her life and still couldn't save him. Despite the warning, Seongah insists on saving Gyeonu, admitting that she has fallen for him at first sight. The following day, Gyeonu transfers into Seongah's class, catching her off guard. When her reaction draws attention, the class president, Archery, mocks her, but Seongah hides behind a fake smile. Noticing this, Gyeonu pretends to know her, easing the awkwardness. After class, he advises her not to hide her pain, and she realizes he doesn't recognize her as the shaman. On her way home, Seongah tells Jiho about Gyeonu's situation, but Archery interrupts and belittles her once again. Later, Gyeonu stops by to watch the archery club and reflect on his past. Later, Byom goes to the restroom alone, only to be attacked by the water ghost. Elsewhere, Gyeonu is almost crushed due to his misfortune, but Seongah rushes in to save him, only to be saved by Gyeonu instead. Determined to protect him, Seongah visits another shaman, Manshik, to create protective talismans. The next day, Byom is found unconscious and rushed to the hospital, while Seongah collapses in class and misses the chance to give Gyeonu the talismans. That night, when Oksun and Gyeonu return to collect them, Seongah senses that his next misfortune involves drowning. However, Gyeonu, having lost faith in shamans, dismisses her as a fraud and leaves. Despite this, Seongah decides to abandon her dream of going to college to focus on saving Gyeonu. The following morning, while researching ways to save him, she learns about Byom's incident but initially doubts it. However, after noticing wet palm prints leading into the men's restroom, she confronts the water ghost and quickly subdues it. But before she can leave, several bullies and Gyeonu arrive. Sensing Gyeonu's presence, the ghost immediately attacks him, making it seem like he is drowning. Acting quickly, Seongah sticks the talismans to a hose and sprays water on Gyeonu until the ghost vanishes. Once Gyeonu recovers, Seongah is left unable to explain her actions. Later, Seongah, Gyeonu, and the bullies are assigned a week of cleaning duty. Afterward, Seongah tries to explain things to Gyeonu, but he avoids her. At the same time, a fire ghost tries to start a fire near the storage room, but Seongah arrives just in time to stop it. While scolding the ghost, the bully leader, Jinung, misunderstands, but she calms him down. As they leave, she quietly signals to a ghost dog, Boki, showing she only helped because of it. Back home, Seongah celebrates saving Gyeonu, but Dongchan warns her not to relax and gives her more talismans. The next day, Seongah keeps trying to put one on Gyeonu, but he avoids her. Jiho then steals Gyeonu's phone, but before they act, his grandmother, Oksun, shows up with snacks. Later, while Seongah and Jiho try to hide the talisman in the phone pouch, Oksun notices and Seongah quickly lies that she found the phone. Meanwhile, a student named Jo-sung starts digging into Gyeonu's past. Soon after, Gyeonu meets Oksun, who tells him about the phone and happily commends him for making friends, but Gyeonu denies it. Seongah immediately asks to be his friend, even getting Oksun's approval. However, trouble begins when Jo-sung spreads a rumor that Gyeonu was expelled from his old school for being an arsonist. At the same time, Gyeonu avoids the archery coach, Yang, who doesn't recognize him at first. Later that day, Seongah goes to Gyeonu's house to hide the talismans under the pretext of having a meal. During the meal, Jiho asks about Gyeonu's parents, and Oksun quickly says they live abroad. Sensing the tension, Jiho apologizes, and Seongah shares that she's adopted to ease the mood. Later, when Jiho pulls her into Gyeonu's room, Seongah tries to hide the talismans but accidentally knocks over his metal box, drawing Gyeonu's attention. Elsewhere, Coach Yang finally remembers that Gyeonu used to be a talented archer. Meanwhile, Jiho distracts Gyeonu as Seongah hides one talisman before rushing to the shrine. Outside, Oksun stops her and reveals that she already knows Seongah's identity as the shaman after seeing her put the talisman in Gyeonu's phone pouch. At the same time, Gyeonu tells Jiho to stay away from him. The next day, Jiho and Seongah overhear the rumors about Gyeonu being an arsonist. During lunch, everyone avoids Gyeonu except Seongah and Jiho. Seongah believes the arson incident may be caused by his misfortune, not him. That night, Oksun secretly brings food to Seongah's shrine, but Gyeonu follows her and confronts Seongah, accusing her of using his grandmother. However, Seongah ignores his outburst and realizes that his next misfortune will involve fire. The following day, Gyeonu heads to the school storage to avoid his classmates. When Seongah learns about this, she recalls seeing a fire ghost in the storage and hurries over to save Gyeonu. Meanwhile, the fire ghost has already set the storage on fire, and Gyeonu gives up after remembering how a friend of his got hurt in a fire because of him. But soon, Seongah rushes in and tries to stop the ghost with her talismans. Unfortunately, it is not enough, but thankfully, Jiho arrives in time and uses a fire extinguisher to stop the flames. Later, a teacher blames Gyeonu for starting the fire, and Seongah tells Gyeonu to defend himself, but he lashes out at her, telling her to stop interfering and fix her own fake smiles. Even though she is hurt, Seongah tells Jiho that she will keep trying to save him. That night, after learning that Coach Yang called his former team, Gyeonu bluntly turns down his request to join the archery team. Meanwhile, Oksun visits Seongah and explains how Gyeonu always hides his pain behind a smile, which has kept her going. At the same time, Coach Yang talks to Gyeonu and reveals that he knows about the accidents around him. Even so, he refuses to give up on him, but Gyeonu still refuses to return to archery. Meanwhile, Oksun pleads with Seongah to save Gyeonu, but when Seongah tries to hold her hand, she realizes that Oksun is already a ghost. At that same moment, Gyeonu finds his grandmother's lifeless body and is left devastated. Seongah then promises Oksun that she will save Gyeonu before rushing to the funeral hall in her shaman outfit. Ignoring the stares from others, she approaches Gyeonu, and when he tries to stop her, she firmly brushes him off, saying she is there for his grandmother. At the funeral, Seongah tries to call Dongshin for support because no one came for Oksun's funeral, but Dongshin is too busy, so she texts Jiho instead. Meanwhile, Dongshin and several shamans head to a cursed shack for an exorcism. Shortly after, Gyeonu's relatives arrive to make trouble, and Seongah tries to stop them. Luckily, Jiho arrives in time to keep things from escalating. While performing the exorcism at the cursed shack, Dongchen realizes that they're dealing with a powerful curse, so she orders everyone to leave, and after getting hit by the curse, she also rushes out and locks down the cabin. Meanwhile, Gyeonu learns that Seongah told Jiho about the funeral, making him wonder if she came. But Jiho lies that Seongah works nearby and saw Gyeonu entering the funeral hall, so she called him. Just then, Gyeonu's uncle arrives and informs him that his parents will be coming soon, so Gyeonu immediately leaves to avoid them. Meanwhile, Dongshan returns the village chief's money because they can't handle the cursed shack. However, she promises to keep searching for a solution. But just as Dongcheon turns to leave, she stumbles upon an earring belonging to another shaman, Yeomhwa. On his way home, Gyeonu receives a message from his friend, Huina, mocking Oksun's death. Seongah calls Manshik, asking him to make another batch of talismans, but he charges her an exorbitant fee to learn how to make them herself. At the shrine, Dongchon discusses the cursed shack with the Grand Shaman, revealing that someone offered themselves as a sacrifice there, and it soon becomes clear that Yeonhwa is behind it all. Seongah soon arrives and begs Dongchon and the Grand Shaman for help regarding Gyeonu's predicament. However, they simply hand her an ancient book to find the solution herself, but Seongah is too dumb to translate it. After school, Seongah goes to Gyeonu's house to check on him and suddenly freezes when she sees a dark spirit that only appears when one has dark thoughts. She begs him not to have such thoughts, but Gyeonu tells her to leave. Regretting his decision, he rushes out to stop her, only to run into Jiho, who hands him the keys to the archery club. Elsewhere, Dongchon fails to locate Yeonhwa, but immediately she leaves, Yeonhwa appears, making it clear she's avoiding Dongchon. Later, Seongah begs Dongchon for help to save Gyeonu and tells her about the dark spirit, which apparently inches closer to its victim the more they harbor dark thoughts. Dongchon suggests Seongah become a human talisman and stick to Gyeonu like glue. Seongah, being a creep, absolutely loves the idea and soon begins to tattoo talismans over her body. While preparing to visit his grandmother's columbarium, Gyeonu can't help but smile, causing the dark spirit to move farther from him. After Seongah finishes drawing the talismans all over her body, she practices how to naturally approach Gyeonu without appearing creepy. She then goes to his house to walk him to school, and when she lightly touches him, the dark spirit moves away. At school, everyone blames Jusung for spreading rumors about Gyeonu, especially when they learn about his grandmother's death. This is because Coach Yang scolded the teacher who accused Gyeonu and cleared Gyeonu of all suspicions in the process. At the same time, Seongah touches Gyeonu's hand a few times to push the dark spirit away further, and for the rest of the day, she sticks to Gyeonu like an annoying piece of gum. When Jiho asks about it, she explains it to him, and Jiho suggests telling Gyeonu, but Seongah refuses because Gyeonu hates shamans. After school, Seongah follows Gyeonu to the columbarium to visit his grandmother. There, she gives him a pep talk, making him realize that his grandmother was the happiest whenever he won a gold medal. With this realization, the dark spirit moves even further away, making Seongah happy. Later, Gyeonu heads to the archery club, finally practicing a few shots as Coach Yang watches from afar. The following day, Seongah is excited to be in the same group project as Gyeonu. But her excitement vanishes when she sees a little ghost clinging to her group member named Doyeon. This is because underdeveloped ghosts are the hardest to appease since they can't even talk. After school, Coach Yang approaches Gyeonu and ropes him into another practice session. As Seongah watches from afar, she realizes that the dark spirit moves farther away with every shot that Gyeonu takes. So, she decides to focus on making talismans to keep the little ghostie in check. The next day, Seongah arrives at school early and hides the talisman underneath Doyeon's desk. Soon after, Gyeonu arrives and takes her to the rooftop to ask why she keeps following him. Instead of answering, Seongah asks how he feels about archery, and Gyeonu reveals that it makes him happy. Gyeonu is stunned when Seongah suddenly strokes his hair, saying she's proud of him. She then explains that she follows him because she wants to be friends. This takes him by surprise, and as he reflects on how everything she did practically brings light to his world, the dark spirit instantly vanishes. Seongah is so happy she locks hands with Gyeonu, but instead of letting go, he holds on to her tightly, leaving Seongah flustered. That night, Seongah is unable to focus at work while Gyeonu messes up during archery practice. Meanwhile, Yeonhwa arrives at Oksun's resting place for another round of mischief. Meanwhile, Dongchon and Seongah are performing a ceiling rite at the cursed shack when they run into two streamers. Seongah scares them away, but as soon as she leaves, they break in and are possessed by the evil spirit. The following day, Seongah awkwardly gives Gyeonu a cute lip balm to serve as an amulet. Apparently, giving him something with facial features that bears her scent works as an amulet in her absence. On their way to school, Jiho watches helplessly as Seongah and Gyeonu flirt with each other. Gyeonu blushes hard when Seongah suddenly grabs his tie while protecting him from the little ghostie on Doyeon. However, he becomes suspicious that she likes the bully Jinung when he sees her staring at him. Later, when Seongah acts cute while watching Jinung pass by, Jaeho asks her about it while Gyeonu approaches Jinung and sizes him up to see the so-called cuteness. Seongah tells Jiho about Jinung's cute guardian dog, Boki, and the ghost clinging to Doyeon that has been making others feel nauseous. But Jiho can't relate because he has a strong energy flow. Jiho then watches with silent envy as Seongah chatters about her love for Gyeonu. At the cursed shack, the two streamers are found barely alive, and Dongchan decides to perform a cleansing rite. Seongah receives her call, and before leaving, she touches Gyeonu's hand, making him blush. That night, Seongah and Dongchan first perform a ceremony to save the streamers' wandering souls. Meanwhile, as soon as Gyeonu gets home, he runs into Yeomwa and breaks down when she tosses the pictures of his grandmother, which she turned into a talisman. It immediately becomes clear that she's working for his parents, and without warning, she splashes salt on him, but Gyeonu quietly takes it all. Despite the inhumane treatment, Gyeonu is comforted when he sees the lip balm from Seongah. The following morning, Seongah falls asleep on the bus, and Gyeonu uses his hand to cushion her head. She also falls asleep in class while the gossip monger, Jo Sung, stumbles upon the streamer's video and discovers that Seongah might be the shaman in it. To confirm this, he presses Seongah for answers and soon gathers the attention of the class. As usual, Seongah fakes a smile, but Gyeonu arrives and angrily warns Jo Sung to back off. As he storms off, Seongah and Jiho follow him, but Gyeonu only ends up scolding Seongah for not fighting back. Seongah wants to scream and tell him that she's a shaman, but she holds back because he hates them. Still, she doesn't take his harsh words to heart, but Jiho is annoyed and invites Gyeonu for archery training. There, he tells Gyeonu that he taught Seongah how to fake smiles and asks him not to be harsh on her. Apparently, when he first met her, she struggled to fit in, so he advised her to feign confidence behind a smile. Jiho finally admits that he actually has a crush on Seongah, taking Gyeonu by surprise. That night, during the cleansing rite, Dongchan closes early because Seongah is distracted thinking about Gyeonu while she's occupied with Yeomwa. On the way home, they run into Gyeonu, who begs to take a picture of Seongah's face to use it to prove his friend's innocence. Carried away by her love-sick brain, Seongah almost takes off the mask, but Dongchan stops her. So, Gyeonu turns to leave and texts Seongah to meet up. Seongah's phone almost gives her away, but she quickly barks at Gyeonu, scaring him into leaving. However, she immediately regrets it, and to console her, Dongchan buys her a beautiful dress, urging her to go meet Gyeonu. Seongah excitedly rushes out to meet him in a park, and Gyeonu immediately apologizes for being harsh earlier. Suddenly, the power goes out, so they both sit, and Seongah soon notices that Gyeonu's energy has attracted a bunch of ghosts. So she holds his hands while telling him how Dongchan used to hold her hand through the night. Seeing Seongah smile so brightly, Gyeonu apologizes again for scolding her and explains that her fake smile reminded him of when he used to do the same despite being treated like trash. Seongah then embraces Gyeonu to comfort him, and they quickly separate when the power comes on. The following day, Gyeonu and Seongah cycle to school like a couple, and even run through the school field all lovey-dovey. Meanwhile, Dongchan visits Manshik to ask about Yeomwa. However, Yeomwa hangs up on him because she's too busy cooking up mischief at the cursed shack. At school, Jinung challenges Gyeonu because he reported them for smoking, but Gyeonu ignores him to practice archery and later tells the coach that he'll be staying on the team. That night, Seongah runs into Yeomwa at the cursed shack and mistakes her for one of the shamans invited by Dongchan. Yeomwa exploits the lie and makes Seongah perform the cleansing rite dance with her without her mask. Unfortunately, Gyeonu arrives at that very moment to witness the whole thing, shattering all his faith in Seongah. Just then, Seongha spots Gyeonu and runs after him, but he breaks down, convinced she might be working with Yeomha. Later, he runs into Jinung, who kicks him to the ground and leaves with his gang when Gyeonu suddenly starts wailing. Seongah arrives soon after and drives off a few ghosts before apologizing, but Gyeonu refuses to accept it. At the cursed shack, Dongcheon and other shamans discover that someone is trying to create an evil deity. Unable to handle it, they decide to seal it from the outside. Meanwhile, Gyeonu thinks about Seong while frantically cleaning his grandmother's pictures. She had begged him to let her protect him for just 5 days, which would mark the end of his misfortune. That night, Dongchan paces around as she worries over the cursed shack and suspects that Yeomwa is behind it. The following morning, her suspicions are confirmed when Seongah reveals she met Yeomwa at the shack. Manshik then explains that Yeomwa has turned evil and cast a spell on the shack to sacrifice anyone who enters. At school, Jiho asks why Gyeonu and Seongah are acting weird, but none of them answers. When others point out the awkwardness, Seongah pulls Jiho and Gyeonu to the rooftop and reveals she's a shaman. Jiho pretends it's news to him, while Gyeonu asks why she befriended him, but she can't answer. Jiho tries to tell the truth, but Seongah stops him, not wanting Gyeonu to know he only has a few days left. Meanwhile, Dongchan prepares to hunt Yeonhwa, only to learn she's gone off the grid. After school, Hyori drags everyone to work on their project while Jiho sticks to Gyeonu. He doesn't want to reveal he knew Seonggah's identity to make sure Gyeonu still has someone to trust. On the way, Doyeon is attacked by a crazy lady who lost her little one. Seongah hurriedly separates them to keep the little ghostie from waking up. Unfortunately, it still does, and Seongah turns into a weirdo while making funny faces to pacify it. She then rushes to hold Gyeonu's hand, but the next minute the ghost starts crying, shattering Gyeonu's glass. Later, Seongah follows Doyeon home to find a way to send the ghostie off. At Doyeon's house, she discovers that Doyeon has a thing for dolls, and one of them is connected to the ghost. Seongah tries to buy the doll, but Doyeon throws her out. Back at school, Gyeonu finally realizes that Seongah has been touching him for a specific reason and not because she wants to be friends. At the shrine, Seongah complains to Manshik that her human talisman couldn't protect Gyeonu, so Manshik advises her to find out when exactly it stopped working. That night, Gyeonu dumps Seonggah's amulet while Doyeon suffers from restlessness due to the crying ghost. At school, it continues to cry, affecting everyone in class, especially Gyeonu. In the library, Seongah holds Gyeonu to test the talisman, but he suddenly embraces her and reveals he knows she's doing it to cast some kind of spell. Suddenly, the ghost starts crying, toppling over some shelves, and injuring Gyeonu. Seongah realizes with shock that her touch no longer works as an amulet. At the hospital, she tells Jiho about it and explains that it's because Gyeonu now dislikes her. So she gives Jiho a talisman to put on Gyeonu and decides to find another way to protect him. At the shrine, the village chief brings the woman who attacked Doyeon earlier, because she lost her mind after a miscarriage. Seongah then realizes that the woman attacked Doyeon because of the doll. After confirming that the doll was serving as the woman's ward, Seongah rushes over to Doyeon's house and straight up comes clean about being a shaman. Meanwhile, Jiho mistakenly picks up Gyeonu's phone while hiding the talisman, and Gyeonu darts off with it as soon as he realizes the call is from Huina. In the meantime, Seongah tells Doyeon about the haunted doll, and Doyeon admits she took it from the woman. Apparently, Doyeon's mother threw out the doll, and the woman found it, but Doyeon later took it back. Seongah then reveals that the woman is actually the ghostie's mother, and giving back the doll is the only way to soothe the ghost. At school, Jiho overhears Gyeonu's call and asks why Huina wants him to be miserable. Gyeonu explains she was a friend who got hurt because of him and firmly warns Jiho to stay away or suffer the same fate. Meanwhile, Seongah finally convinces Doyeon to give up the doll, and at the shrine, she runs into Jiho, who immediately offers to be Gyeonu's human amulet. After marking him, Seongah sends him to find an item with facial features as a replacement. With no other choice, Jiho gives up his favorite toy and hugs Gyeonu, leaving him confused. Later, Seongah tracks down the grieving woman and finds her outside Gyeonu's house, and she watches as Gyeonu quietly stands beside the grieving woman. After he leaves, Seongah approaches and quietly places the doll back in her crib. The woman lights up when she sees this and finally leaves, but Seongah breaks down when she finds her lip balm in the trash. As it starts raining, Gyeonu steps out to shield her with an umbrella. It turns out Gyeonu had stepped out earlier to retrieve the lip balm, only to find Seongah outside. When he brings her inside, Seongah notices the drawings on the photos and explains that marking a dead person's face like that is a curse, and the only way to stop it is to burn the photos. However, Gyeonu refuses and decides to ask Yeonhwa to undo the curse herself. Seongah is devastated, especially after realizing that the shaman she danced with was behind it all. Convinced she's working with Yeonhwa, Gyeonu kneels and begs her to let him go. Seongah simply apologizes and tells him that she only met Yeonhwa for the first time at the shack. Later, Jiho secretly follows Gyeonu to his parents' house. Meanwhile, Seongah heads to the columbarium and discovers a cursed talisman on Oksun's urn. Shortly after, Gyeonu's father arrives and treats him like trash, but Gyeonu refuses to leave until he meets Yeonhwa. Seongah rushes home and begs Dongchan for a cleansing rite to protect Oksun's spirit. When Gyeonu finally meets Yeonhwa, she ignores his request and sticks an evil talisman on him, but Jiho's amulet reacts and protects Gyeonu, making Yeonhwa realize that someone is backing him. Pretending to cooperate, she offers to help and asks to visit his house. After completing the cleansing ritual, Seongah notices several missed calls from Jiho and hurries over. By the time she arrives, Yeomhwa has already found the protective amulet, but Seongah snatches it from her. She asks to speak privately, but Yeomhwa forces Gyeonu to stay by threatening him with the cursed photos. However, when Seongah boldly reveals her true shamanic form, Yeomhwa changes her mind. Meanwhile, Dongcheon decides to curse Yeomhwa even though it means harming herself. While the curse takes off to find Yeomhwa, Seongah confronts Yeomhwa and reveals that she never intended to lift the curse on Oksun. Hearing this, Gyeonu decisively burns the photos himself. Yeomhwa decides to leave, but not before calling Gyeonu newly dead. As Seongah angrily confronts her, Dongcheon's curse finally hits Yeomhwa. Seongah warns her to seek help from her deity, revealing that it has already abandoned her because of her evil deeds, but Yeomhwa ignores the warning. Later, Seongah calls Jiho and tells him to stay close to Gyeonu at all times, as he only has 2 days left to escape his fate. Meanwhile, Gyeonu reflects on everything that has happened, and as he begins to see Seongah differently, the light on her amulet returns. At the cursed shack, Yeomhwa breaks the seal and performs a ritual to help the evil spirit ascend into a deity. The next day at school, Seongah and Jiho work together to keep Gyeonu safe. But during PE, she senses something wrong when she notices several faceless ghosts. Realizing the danger, she quickly signals Jiho to stay with Gyeonu and rushes home. She later calls Jiho again, reminding him not to leave Gyeonu alone. Meanwhile, at the shrine, Seongah and Dongcheon prepare for a major fight, knowing that the appearance of faceless ghosts signals the rise of an evil deity. Afterwards, they arrive at the shack and begin fighting off ghosts like it's Avengers Endgame. To stop the situation from getting worse, they search for the missing head of a puppet. Meanwhile, Jiho sticks to Gyeonu during archery practice, convincing the coach that he might be in a BL series. Back at the shack, Manshik finally finds the head, and Seongah boldly cuts her palm and grabs it, explaining it's the fastest way to counter the spell. Meanwhile, Gyeonu recalls the name that Yeomhwa called Seongah, so he does a Google search, and discovers that Seongah was a popular young shaman exploited and abandoned by her parents. At the shack, Seongah shares the story, making Manshik emotional. She then reveals that because her parents and the evil shaman hurt a lot of people, she was bullied in middle grade. After restoring the puppet, Manshik and Dongcheon console Seongah while Gyeonu admits to Jiho that he's been a jerk to Seongah. Jiho hits him with a pillow, almost spilling the fact that the next day is the day Gyeonu escapes his fate. But the following day, trouble brews when Jinung breaks into the cursed shack to escape his abusive father. Boki quickly alerts Seongah, but she hesitates and decides to enter the shack after sending a message to Dongcheon. As she struggles to help Jinung, Gyeonu suddenly arrives, leaving her feeling helpless. After she left the class earlier, Jiho and Gyeonu had followed her. But as soon as Gyeonu enters the shack, the door slams shut, locking Jiho outside. Inside, Seongah pushes Gyeonu away, but he refuses to leave. While Dongcheon and Manshik rush toward the shack, Seongah discovers a photo of Gyeonu and realizes that Yeomhwa has already offered him to the evil spirit. Suddenly, the evil spirit takes over Gyeonu's body, and Jiho's protective amulet shatters. Seongah angrily demands that he leave, but he refuses. When the spirit touches her, Seongah's amulet reacts, allowing Gyeonu to briefly regain control. Infuriated by this realization, the spirit tricks Seongah and escapes. While Dongcheon chases after him, Seongah and Manshik perform a cleansing ritual for Jinung. Meanwhile, Dongcheon blocks Yeomhwa from seeing Gyeonu, and Yeomhwa tries to fight back, but collapses. After completing the ritual, Seongah warns Jiho to stay away from Gyeonu for his own safety. At the same time, the evil spirit wanders through town, searching for Gyeonu's school. It soon runs into a group of bullies harassing Byum and asks them for directions. When they fail to respond, the spirit attacks them, scaring Byum away. Jiho later spots the bullies dragging Gyeonu and rushes in to help, only to realize that he has handled them. Noticing Jiho's school uniform, he decides to follow him to an arcade. However, the loud environment triggers memories of a battlefield, but Seongah arrives just in time and grabs his hand, allowing Gyeonu to regain control. She pulls him outside and, believing she is speaking to the spirit, begs it to release Gyeonu. In the process, she reveals everything about his limited time and how she has been trying to save Gyeonu. When Gyeonu asks why she's doing it, Seongah admits that it's because he's her first love. Gyeonu then reveals that he's currently in control, but as soon as she lets go of his hand, the spirit takes over, making Seongah realize that holding his hand keeps Gyeonu conscious. They then return to the shrine for an exorcism, but despite their efforts, the exorcism fails, and the spirit eventually breaks free. However, Seongah grabs him and breaks down, feeling that all her efforts to save Gyeonu have been wasted. Later, Dongcheon prepares to confine Gyeonu, but her attempts to restrain him fail, forcing Seongah to stay with him instead. Meanwhile, Dongcheon and Manshik check on Yeonhwa, and Manshik expresses concern about keeping both her and the spirit in the same place, and by the following morning, the evil spirit escapes. He dresses up like a clown and eventually finds Gyeonu's school, where he encounters Coach Yang. The coach makes him change into an archery uniform and brings him to practice. Meanwhile, Seongah searches for Gyeonu, and Boki leads her to the school field. Jiho also arrives and is confused by Gyeonu's strange behavior. Suddenly, the spirit points an arrow at him, confirming that he's no longer Gyeonu before kicking Jiho and running off. Seongah arrives shortly after and learns what happened. Back at the shrine, Dongcheon prepares a ritual to cleanse Yeonhwa. Meanwhile, Seongah tracks the spirit to the storage area and demands to hold his hand, but he refuses. Later, Seongah asks for the evil spirit's name, but when he can't remember, she decides to name him Bongsu. She then tricks him into responding to the name 3 times, gaining temporary control over him. She immediately grabs his hand, allowing Gyeonu to regain control. However, they cannot return to the shrine, so they are forced to stay close together. But things become complicated when Jinung confronts Seongah, demanding to know how she knew about his dead dog. Jiho intervenes, causing Seongah and Gyeonu to separate. Once free, Bongsu attacks Jiho before escaping. Jinung refuses to let Seongah go, but she eventually tells him about the dog, leaving him puzzled. Later, Seongah finds Bongsu signing up for an archery competition, so she tries to stop him, but he grabs her hand, allowing Gyeonu to take over. Gyeonu explains that he made a deal to allow Bongsu to use his body during school hours in exchange for joining the competition. Seongah is worried about his safety, but Gyeonu reassures her that he feels safe when she's with him and finally confesses that he likes her, pulling her into an embrace. During Yeonhwa's cleansing ceremony, she expresses her hatred for Dongcheon for stopping her from making her dead son a deity. At school, Jiho gets jealous seeing Seongah and Gyeonu stick together like glue. After the cleansing ritual, Yeonhwa assures Dongcheon that she'll regret saving her. But Dongcheon ignores the warning and instructs Manshik to lock her in the prayer room because she wants Yeonhwa to pay for her sins through devotion. Later, Jiho confronts Seongah and Gyeonu about holding hands and asks if they're dating. Seongah denies it, but Gyeonu immediately confesses his feelings for her again. And for the rest of the day, Gyeonu and Seongah stick together except when Gyeonu has to use the bathroom. Jiho watches with envy as they act all lovey-dovey with each other, but he still admits that Gyeonu's confession was quite cool. Back home, Gyeonu apologizes for springing the confession on her, but Seongah blushes, explaining that she actually liked it. She then tells him that she fell in love with him the very first time he stepped into the shrine. Gyeon also reveals that he fell in love with her on the rooftop when she rubbed his hair. To solidify their feelings, they try to kiss, but Jiho almost rams into them, ruining the moment. And to make matters worse, he blurts out his feelings for Seongah. At school, Byum avoids a call from his bullies, so they call him using Jo-sung's phone, and Jo-sung, who is clueless, even helps them. Meanwhile, Jiho continues to tell Seongah about his feelings while she holds onto Gyeonu's hand. To avoid breaking his heart, Seongah proposes putting all their feelings aside until they deal with Bongsu. Unfortunately, she mistakenly lets go of Gyeonu's hand, and when Bongsu resurfaces, he begins mocking Jiho for being a pushover. Later, Jiho is devastated when he finds his precious toy shattered, but Seongah's lip balm remains intact. He's even more horrified when he learns that Seongah and Gyeonu have to hold hands in bed. But for Gyeonu, it's also pure torture, especially when Seongah suddenly rolls too close to him. That night, Dongcheon decides to keep vigil, suspecting that Yeonhwa will make her move after midnight because spirits are stronger at that hour. Once it's past midnight, Bongsu takes over Gyeonu's body and stares longingly at Seongah, revealing that he has been watching through the shack even when he was just an invisible evil spirit. Soon, Yeonhwa calls him for a meeting, and Dongcheon and the others secretly follow them. Yeonhwa then tells Bongsu to become her deity soon, but he rejects her and even treats her like trash. He then returns to the room while Yeonhwa calls out to the audience, who start mocking her for being abandoned by a deity she created. Just then, the Grand Shaman arrives and scolds everyone, especially Yeonhwa. The situation gets out of control when Seongah and Gyeonu arrive, and the Grand Shaman pounces on Gyeonu. When Bongsu takes over, he almost skewers her, but Seongah talks him down. While he's distracted, she holds him, and Gyeonu returns and apologizes to everyone before rushing out with Seongah. He then tells Seongah to rush out and call his number, explaining that he found a way to keep Bongsu in line. Seongah does as she's told, and Gyeonu's phone starts playing gunshot sounds, triggering Bongsu's PTSD. Unable to bear the pain, Bongsu agrees to never harm anyone, so they return to the shrine where he apologizes to everyone. After that, Gyeonu takes over, and the Grand Shaman tells him that his ears hurt because he will start hearing ghosts, and gradually, other senses will open to the spirit realm. Apparently, this is dangerous because then, Bongsu will take total control of his body, so she makes Gyeonu promise to tell her if anything changes. Later, Gyeonu apologizes to Bongsu, and Seongah gives him a little pep talk, after which he reluctantly agrees to let it go when Seongah threatens not to give him Gyeonu's body during school hours. At school, he fully cooperates with her and allows Gyeonu to take over when it's time for archery practice. Seongah notices that Gyeonu always taps his finger before every shot, and Gyeonu explains that it's just a habit. For the next few days, Bongsu searches for a memorial stone while Seongah holds Gyeonu during archery practice. One night, Yeonhwa approaches Bongsu again, but as usual, he treats her like garbage. Meanwhile, Seongah worries because she can't find a way to help Gyeonu take over during the competition. But Bongsu shows her a talisman that can help Gyeonu briefly stay conscious, but it can only be used once. Seongah then draws the talisman on Gyeonu, and it works, but to make sure it's foolproof, she gives him the lip balm amulet. On the day of the competition, Yeonhwa performs a ritual to force Gyeonu's senses to open, and it works as Gyeonu starts seeing ghosts and even sees Seongah's true form. To keep Seongah from worrying, Gyeonu hides the fact that his spirit sight has awakened. While preparing for the competition, he struggles to focus because of the ghosts around. Later, his former teammates confront him for what happened to Hwina, but rather than argue, Gyeonu calmly talks them down. At the shrine, Dongcheon discovers Yeonhwa's plans, but when she tries to stop her, she discovers that Yeonhwa blocked the entrance. At the shrine, Dongcheon discovers Yeonhwa's plan, but when she tries to interfere, she realizes the entrance has already been blocked. Meanwhile, Gyeonu focuses on Seongah, which helps him maintain his performance. However, as Yeonhwa's spell intensifies, Seongah begins to feel it, causing Gyeonu to lose concentration. Having anticipated this, Seongah had already cast a spell earlier, making herself Gyeonu's first line of defense. She counters Yeonhwa's spell just as Gyeonu runs out of time and takes his shot, scoring perfectly. Although they win the round, Seongah is injured from the backlash. After receiving his medal, Gyeonu feels the weight of his grandmother's absence, but his mood lifts when he sees Seongah, and he places the medal on her instead. Later, he visits the columbarium alone to visit his grandmother, but before leaving, he notices a dark mass forming around Seongah. Back at the shrine, Dongcheon confronts Yeonhwa and reveals that her spell has backfired into a curse. When Seongah arrives, Dongcheon realizes she was affected and becomes furious. Seongah, however, is distracted by a mysterious, invisible wooden box attached to Yeonhwa. Meanwhile, at the columbarium, Gyeonu consults the Grand Shaman about the dark energy surrounding Seongah. She explains that Seongah's energy has been tainted, so she will face divine punishment. Gyeonu offers to take the punishment in her place, but learns it's impossible. He then asks her to break the connection between him and Seongah to protect her, but even that fails due to the strength of their bond. Instead, the Grand Shaman promises to pray for Seongah's safety and warns Gyeonu never to bleed in front of evil ghosts or he might lose control of his body. Back at the shrine, Seongah asks Yeonhwa about the wooden box, but Yeonhwa has no idea what she means. In town, Gyeonu begins avoiding ghosts, but when he spots the dark spirit following Biome, he considers stepping in but stops himself, remembering the warning. When he returns to the shrine, Seongah distances herself from him, but he later finds her notes about saving him and teases her about it. Though she snaps at him, she later apologizes and admits she's worried about him. Because of this, Gyeonu chooses to keep his condition a secret. Seongah soon falls asleep and rolls into his arms, almost giving him a heart attack. But the next morning, when Dongcheon catches them, she breaks Gyeonu's legs. At school, the class is asked to share their dreams, and Seongah is mocked for saying she simply wants to attend graduation and go to college, while Gyeonu refuses to share his. However, Seongah later learns that his goal is just to become an adult, making her suspect he might be younger than them. Soon after, Byum returns to class, and Seongah notices the dark spirit still clinging to him. She wants to help, but Gyeonu stops her, especially after realizing she has a fever. Meanwhile, Yeomhwa begins to piece things together and is thrown into a rage when she realizes the wooden box on her back is her child trapped and unable to move on. She confronts Dongchen, who explains that it's divine punishment for her actions. Refusing to accept this, Yeomhwa vows to curse Dongchen, but Dongchen calmly hands her a scarf, telling her to use it properly for the curse. The next day, Byum reaches his breaking point after being pressured by bullies and decides to check out in the restroom. Seongah follows him, and although Gyeonu tries to stop her, he ultimately joins her after Bongsu reminds him of his promise to protect her. During the struggle, Gyeonu accidentally cuts himself, spilling blood in front of the ghost. This triggers his full spiritual awakening, causing him to collapse. When he regains consciousness, he takes Seongah home and stays by her side until she recovers. After Seongah finally wakes up, she drags Gyeonu to the field for archery practice, but afterwards, she calmly calls him Bongsu and asks what he did to Gyeonu. Bongsu tries to deny it, but Seongah reveals that he didn't tap his fingers during practice like Gyeonu. Realizing he can no longer pretend, Bongsu finally drops the act and reveals that he already devoured Gyeonu's soul. It is revealed that Bongsu had planned everything, and he had already started pretending from the moment he woke up in the infirmary. That night, Yeomhwa prepares to leave, but when she demands Bongsu's ring, he refuses. Instead, he tells Dongchen, who realizes Yeomhwa plans to summon a Grim Reaper to destroy Gyeonu's soul. Dongchen shares this with Seongah, advising her to be nice to Bongsu and learn what he truly wants so they can guide him to the afterlife. Although the method is slow, Seongah agrees, and Bongsu is pleased when he finds out. The next day, he takes advantage of the situation, constantly reminding Seongah that she must do whatever he asks. When Jiho learns that Gyeonu is gone, he confronts Bongsu, but calms down when Bongsu admits he did it because he was jealous that he couldn't touch Seongah. That evening, Bongsu runs into Jinung, and the two walk into an alley where they find bullies harassing Byum and Josung. After handling the situation, the group bonds together, and as the boys leave the alley hand in hand, the dark spirit trailing Byum finally disappears. The following day, Bongsu begins to live diligently, and in no time, he becomes popular and easygoing, but Seongah grows uneasy, worried that Gyeonu may completely fade away. Manshik advises her to use the time after midnight to reach him. During that time, Gyeonu finds himself inside Bongsu's memories, where he encounters a young soldier, Yunbo, and another unidentified soldier. He regains awareness when Seongah calls his name. Gyeonu tells her about the soldiers, and she encourages him to get closer to them. As time runs out, Gyeonu fades back into the memories, but when he tries to approach the soldiers, they react aggressively, forcing him to retreat. Meanwhile, Yeomhwa learns from Manshik that Seongah has been meeting Gyeonu during spirit time and decides to exploit that information. A few days later, Bongsu becomes excited after being selected for the national archery team trials. He asks Seongah for a kiss if he succeeds, but she refuses, leading him to blurt it out in front of everyone. After practice, Bongsu meets Yeomhwa while Jiho secretly follows him. Yeomhwa then reveals Seongah's secret meetings with Gyeonu to make him fall out with them, causing him to storm off. After the meeting, Yeomhwa calls Manshik to help her make a talisman. Shortly after, she notices Bongsu reacting painfully to the sound of gunshots, but before she can approach him, Jiho arrives. So she tells Bongsu to meet her at the shack when he's ready. That night, Bongsu uses Yeomhwa's talisman to block Gyeonu from resurfacing. When midnight arrives, Seongah calls out to Gyeonu but instead meets Bongsu, who is clearly hurt after being deceived. The next day, Bongsu drags Seongah to the memorial stone he had been searching for, and Jiho follows them. There, he reveals that he was the taller soldier, while Yunbo was his friend who died. His greatest regret is that he never returned Yunbo's ring to his mother. After sharing this, Bongsu buries the ring and declares that he will continue living as Gyeonu. When he tries to take Seongah with him, Jiho steps in to stop him. At the same time, Yeomhwa goes to the shrine to retrieve the talisman from Manshik, but discovers it's a trap. After being captured, Dongchen and the Grand Shaman strip her of her powers before releasing her. Despite this, Yeonhwa doesn't give up, and when Jiho later asks her to save Gyeonu, she lies that she needs Bongsu's ring. Although hesitant, Jiho eventually steals the ring when Bongsu suddenly quits archery. However, the moment he hands it over, he realizes he has been deceived, but Yeonhwa immediately seals the shack and begins summoning the Grim Reaper. As Jiho contacts Seongah, Bongsu suddenly collapses in pain. She rushes him back to the shrine, where Dongchun sets up a protective barrier to hide him from the Grim Reaper. At the same time, Seongah and Manshik prepare a decoy at Yunbo's memorial stone. However, everything falls apart when Bongsu breaks free and redirects the Grim Reaper toward Yeonhwa. When the curse reaches her, Yeonhwa refuses to accept death, but soon realizes the Grim Reaper has gone after Dongcheon, who had turned herself into a human talisman to protect her. Moments later, the Grim Reaper arrives at the shrine and takes Dongcheon's life. Sadly, Yeonhwa returns, only to witness Dongcheon's final moments. Meanwhile, Bongsu is devastated when he realizes that his plan backfired, and before Yeonhwa can confront him, he flees. She tries to chase him, but Seongah stops her and locks her away to protect her, just like Dongcheon once did. The following day, Gyeonu is surprised when he wakes up back in control of his body. He spends time with Seongah, and afterward, she kisses him and promises to return before graduation. After putting him to sleep, she transfers Bongsu into her own body. When Gyeonu wakes up, he quickly realizes what Seongah has done, and just like that, she disappears from his life. At the start of senior year, Seongah's friends are placed in different classes, but their group remains close. While Gyeonu turns into an archery machine, winning medals like he's popping pills. During this time, he also reconciles with Huina, who finally admits that she was the one responsible for the fire in the past. A year later, graduation arrives, but Seongah never returns. Refusing to give up, Gyeonu decides to search for her and visits the shrine. There, Yeonhwa tells him that the shrine's deities have left, which could mean Seongah is dead. However, she explains that Seongah will appear in their dreams when she dies since they're still linked. Yeonhwa suspects that Seongah may have turned evil, but Gyeonu refuses to believe this. So he prepares to find her and chooses a bow as his weapon. He then visits Manshik to demand several talismans, and when Gyeonu leaves, Manshik calls Yeonhwa, revealing that this was part of her plan. She has been searching for Seongah for a year without success, which is why she plans to use Gyeonu's connection to track her. When Sumi suggests telling Gyeonu the truth, Yeonhwa reveals her true goal is to murk Seongah to eliminate Bongsu. Meanwhile, Gyeonu transforms into a ghost hunter and learns that he needs to find faceless ghosts since they flock around evil deities. With Manshik's guidance, he captures one and uses it to gather information, but despite traveling across the country, he fails to locate Seongah. One day, the faceless ghost brings Gyeonu new information, but before he can act, Yeonhwa takes control of it and learns Seongah's location first. Seongah is deep in a forest, consoling souls to accumulate good karma when Yeonhwa suddenly tries to attack her, but Bongsu emerges. Before things escalate, Gyeonu arrives just in time and creates an opening for him to escape, making Yeonhwa furious. But after that encounter, Seongah disappears once more. And 2 years later, Gyeonu has become a well-known archer preparing for the Olympics, while Jiho now lives with him. One day, Gyeonu receives news that the Grand Shaman has passed away. At the shrine, Sumi gives him the lip balm talisman from the Grand Shaman, and on his way out, Gyeonu runs into Yeonhwa, who asks if he has seen Seongah in his dreams. He denies it, but as soon as he gets home, Gyeonu returns to the same recurring dream. He knows it belongs to Seongah, yet she never appears in it. This time, he notices a drawing before Jiho wakes him up. As soon as Gyeonu leaves the dream, Seongah and Bongsu emerge from a cabinet, and Seongah happily sits in the chair where he sat. Bongsu suggests that she meet Gyeonu in the dream, but she refuses, afraid she might harm him. When she notices the drawing, she praises it, but Bongsu reminds her that she was the one who drew it. Later, Gyeonu realizes he has seen the drawing before and traces it back to Manshik's shrine. When he arrives, Manshik quickly hides Bongsu, who is in Seongah's body, inside a box. At the same time, Yeonhwa receives a box connected to her child and learns that the Grand Shaman had been praying for his soul. Back at the shrine, Gyeonu hears a noise from the box, and Manshik tries to distract him, but fails. As Gyeonu opens it, Bongsu suddenly jumps out and attacks him, before running away. Thinking it's Seongah, Gyeonu chases after her, and when he catches up, Bong-soo suddenly kisses him to summon Seongah, but nothing happens. At that moment, Gyeonu realizes that he's dealing with Bong-soo. At the shrine, Yeonhwa performs a ritual to reconnect with Bong-soo, revealing she secretly planted a talisman inside Seongah's lip balm before it was given to Gyeonu. Later, Bong-soo shows up with Gyeonu, and Jae-ho initially mistakes him for Seongah until Bong-soo suddenly kisses him, exposing the truth. They try to dress Bong-soo to pass as Seongah, but his terrible fashion choices make things worse. Unfortunately, before they can prop him up, Jinung returns and immediately alerts the whole gang. But before they arrive, Gyeonu tries to find a decent dress to make Bong-soo pass for Seongah. However, when the gang arrives, Bong-soo slips up when he fails to recognize Doyeon. But after a brief moment, he pulls it off, making everyone believe he's Seongah. As they celebrate her return, Bong-soo begins to feel guilty because Seongah has been missing her friends, but she can't even meet them. Later that night, Bong-soo tells Gyeonu he can meet Seongah during ghost peak hours, but tricks him by pretending to be her, leaving Gyeonu frustrated. The next day, Bong-soo keeps teasing him despite Jiho's warning to stop. That night, Gyeonu finally snaps, but Jiho calms things down and advises him to apologize, reminding him that Bong-soo is still immature. Gyeonu returns and makes peace, but Bong-soo then asks him to die in Seongah's place. Without hesitation, Gyeonu agrees and disguises himself as Bong-soo to draw Seongah out of hiding within her dream, but when Seongah catches on, she tries to stay away, but Gyeonu embraces her tightly. As they catch up, Gyeonu tells Seongah all about their senior year, carefully avoiding his ghost hunting era. After apologizing for leaving her all alone, Gyeonu kisses Seongah, and when she wakes up, Seongah realizes he has taken Bong-soo into his body. Gyeonu urges her to focus on her recovery while he finds a safe way to send Bong-soo off. Later, Jiho arrives and is surprised to see Gyeonu and Bong-soo together, but quickly realizes that Seongah is back, so he happily prepares a feast for her. Seongah soon wakes up to Bong-soo's fashion disaster and heads out to meet Jiho. After their feast, Jiho finally gives up on his first love and moves out of Gyeonu's house without much drama. After Seongah falls asleep, Gyeonu prepares to leave and invites Yeonhwa to sever his connection to Seongah. After severing their connection, Yeonhwa leaves a letter for Seongah before heading back to the shack where it all began with Gyeonu. Yeonhwa then apologizes to Gyeonu for being a painful beach before using a talisman to send him into Bong-soo's mind. When Bong-soo takes over, he complains that Yeonhwa is supposed to die with him, and Yeonhwa reveals it was her plan all along. Meanwhile, Manchik rushes to the shrine to look for Yeonhwa after receiving a large sum from her, but he realizes she's gone, so he rushes to the shack with a group of shamans to save her. But Bong-soo uses his blood to seal the building, and Manchik soon realizes they're no match for such a powerful evil deity. Still, Manchik and Sumi refuse to give up and proceed with the ritual to break into the shack. Meanwhile, Seongah is still stuck in her dream, trying to remember what she forgot. At the shrine, Yeonhwa and Bong-soo endure immense pain, while Manchik tries his best to break the boundary. At the same time, Gyeonu makes a discovery in Bong-soo's memory while Seongah finally remembers that she's a shaman and wakes up. After reading Yeonhwa's letter, Seongah rushes to the shrine and breaks down, begging the deities to return and help her save Gyeonu and Yeonhwa. Back at the shack, Bong-soo complains about the pain, and Yeonhwa says it's because of their long rap sheet. While Manchik struggles to break through, Gyeonu finally makes contact with Yunbo and asks for his friend's name. At the same time, the deities finally answer Seongah's call and return to the shrine alongside Dongcheon's spirit. While Manchik is at his wit's end, he turns around to see that Seongah's power has returned. Manchik is even more relieved to see Dongcheon, but Sumi is puzzled because she can only see Seongah, who immediately uses Dongcheon's sword to easily break Bong-soo's blood seal. She then frees Yeonhwa and asks Bong-soo for his real name. At the same time, Gyeonu calms Yunbo down, finally reminding him that the second soldier is just an illusion. Basically, at the end of his life, Yunbo's will to send his ring back to his mother created an imaginary friend. Gyeonu then comforts Yunbo and introduces himself. Meanwhile, in the shack, Bong-soo shockingly reveals to Seongah that his name is Yunbo, after which he hugs Seongah and apologizes for almost destroying her life. After a bittersweet goodbye, Bong-soo leaves and Gyeonu returns. Afterwards, Seongah, Manchik, and Yeonhwa perform a cleansing ceremony, after which Yeonhwa quietly leaves. However, Gyeonu stops her and asks for her real name, but she refuses to reveal it and bids him farewell. A few weeks later, Gyeonu participates in the second national team trials, and everyone attends to cheer for him except Seongah, who is too busy helping ghosts. After the trials, Gyeonu finds her in a park consoling a ghost, but he can't see the ghost because his spirit eye was closed after Bongsu left. After helping the ghost, Seongah asks about the Olympic trials, and Gyeonu reveals that he made the team. She happily praises him, but Gyeonu suddenly kisses her, and the two lovebirds plan to live happily ever after. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in real life, as the evil spirit she was supposed to exorcise at the beginning of high school walks right into the shrine, forcing Seongah to finish what she started. Thanks for sticking to the end, and make sure to comment Shaman to see what happens in part 2.